Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Roundup. I got to record this a little bit early just to be able to fit the Roundup into my crazy schedule this week, so I might miss something that comes in on like Tuesday afternoon or something like that. But more on all this stuff later. Let's jump in and talk about all the awesome stuff that's been going on. First up, the Retro Gaming Cable's component video cable for the Sega Dreamcast are back in stock. This is one that includes a transcoder designed by Mike Chi of RetroTink fame, and that I reviewed about a year ago, maybe a little bit longer than that. And they've been out of stock for quite a while now, but they're back in stock, they're ready to go. And if you want to see all of the details about it, I did that full deep dive review. And I also, in that video, talked about the new SCART cable that Retro Gaming Cables came out with that's compatible with basically everything, because the original one had some issues with multi-format BVMs and stuff like that. So basically everything that you see in this video is now available to purchase. So if you were waiting on one of these, now is definitely the time to jump on it. There's tons more detail in the post, as well as some basic alternatives. And as far as alternatives go, I always like to recommend cheap solutions when possible, even if there's only a few scenarios in which it might be better or equal to or almost as good or whatever. And I think the number one scenario would be if you have a really nice PC VGA monitor, like the one I always have sitting next to me here, then just getting a cheap VGA cable should be all that you need. You might get a better picture with some slightly better shielded cables, but it's really one of those things where if you get a cheap Amazon cable, you plug it in and there's interference all over the screen, return it. If you plug it in and it works, good. That's all you really need. The only other scenario is if you had planned on eventually doing the internal HDMI mod, but you just wanted something to hold you off. That cheap HDMI cable, the plug and play cables you might be able to get are fine. They don't add any latency at all. They're only compatible with 480p, but they definitely dim the image. They add interference. They're not great solutions. But at the price, if you're like, hey, look, I'm saving up for an HDMI solution, internal HDMI, or I'm saving up for a RetroTink 4K and one of these or something like that, then that's probably good enough to hold you off. And the only other scenario would be if you have an all SCART setup, get the SCART cable, an all component setup, get the component cable. But if you just have a scaler, like the Tink 5X 4K, OSSC Pro, whatever, and you only play the 480p games, then you might be able to get away with just a VGA cable as well to save yourself some money. But when you start scaling stuff to especially 4K, you really start to notice any little bits of analog interference. So depending on your setup, it might be beneficial to just get one of those more expensive cables. But if not, if you're just looking for a way to get the, decent quality 480p, that cheap VGA cable would still work through any of the Tink 5X via the HD15 to SCART, the Tink 4K, the OSSC, OSSC Pro, those will all just plug right in. So, the advantage obviously having a scaler with analog and sometimes digital inputs in the case of the OSSC Pro and the Tink, you get to choose which one you want to use. But the only thing I wouldn't do in that scenario is use the cheap HDMI cable into one of those scalers, because then you don't have the benefit of any of the good analog to digital conversion circuitry, and you're scaling the kind of messy image as well. So that's the only thing that might not be the best choice. Once again, unless you just need a spare, you're saving up, etc. So hopefully I was able to summarize all of that. Probably should have just stuck with watch the video for more details, but not everybody's got 10 minutes to kill 15. So I just word vomited in 3. Hopefully that's good enough. The next batch of pre-orders is now open for those awesome MemCard Pro2s that work with the PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, and work as the USB file save game transfer for PlayStation 3s as well. I really think this is something that any PlayStation fan should own, unless you either already own a stack of memory cards and don't mind already how you have them organized, or if you really, for whatever reason, just don't need any kind of save game support at all. But if you're not in those two categories, this is something that the $50-ish price that it costs will eventually end up saving you money. Because if you get into this, you start playing games, you're going to require multiple memory cards that aren't going to have anywhere near the amazing features that this has and continues to get. There are multiple sellers now that you could all pre-order from. They all should arrive to customers about early December, and there are still multiple colors to choose from. Me personally, I just went with the one that matched the black plastic of the PlayStation 2, but there's transparent, there's white, there's a whole bunch of different ones that you could get. And if you want a ton of info on them, please check out the video Tito from Macho Nacho Productions did a while back. And while it's mostly up to date, there are some updates that have happened since, so you can always just search RetroRGB.com for MemCard Pro2, and you could see all of the firmware updates that have happened since that video. But honestly, I mean, I just can't say enough about these. I tell the stupid story every time, but when the original MemCard Pro came out, I thought, okay, I'll do like a post on it, I'll do an analysis, and after playing with it, and that's back with launch day features, not even all the awesome stuff it has now, but after seeing it, I went, holy crap, I need to do a deep dive video on this. This is something that people need to see. In my opinion, is only all of the updates and enhancements have only reinforced my opinion over the years. This is absolutely awesome. I don't mean to sound like I'm trying to sell it to you, but like at the same time, a bunch of people have mentioned over time, like, I already got a bunch of memory cards. Do I really need this? Yeah, you probably should at least think about it. At the very least, it's an easy way to back up your old memory cards, but I don't think you'll ever use them again after you've used this one. Pre-orders are now open for a new Bluetooth controller adapter, as well as much more for the original front-loading NES consoles. It's made by Retro Time, and it's called the NES Hub, or NES Hub, or however you want to say it. And this plugs into the bottom and allows Bluetooth connectivity for 4 different players, as well as simultaneous connectivity if you have player 1 and 2 already connected. So if you want to, for whatever reason, use both at the same time. It also has dip switch options to enable Famicom expansion audio, so you could do this without modding your NES. Of course, you'd either have to have an EverDrive or you would have to have a Famicom to NES cartridge adapter that has that mod done or already has it built in. I linked to that, of course. And it also has expansion for certain other things like controller adapters for the SNES controller use on this, which those are also up for sale right now. The price is about $60 and they're due to ship by the end of the year. And this looks like a really neat adapter for anybody who still uses front-loading NES consoles. Now, I'm referring to it as a plug-and-play adapter, but you do have to cut a bit of plastic on the bottom. But for whatever reason, most of the NES consoles I've seen over the years already have it cut. So if anybody's used one before, on the bottom of your NES, you could pop out that little plastic I don't know what you would call it, dust cover or something, and you'll see a little rectangular device or little rectangular spot, and either you'll see a port or you'll see a little piece of plastic covering the port with a couple of tiny little things that you need to snip in order to remove that. Even though there really weren't many or any homebrew solutions for the NES for a long time, a lot of the ones I encountered over the years already had that removed. So I don't know if people wanted to cut it just to see what it was, or if there was some kind of device that somebody built years ago that I don't even know about. But if you have a perfect untouched one, maybe that's not something you'd want to do, but I don't think I'd personally have any problem with that, because once you snip that, if you wanted to put the plastic dust cover back over it, then that piece is completely covered. This comes with a plastic cover that you could put over it, so this isn't just exposed on the bottom, and that allows this NES Hub to just plug right in. So essentially, you get Bluetooth controller support, Famicom expansion audio, and a bunch more expandable future features that might be able to come on just by plugging this thing into the bottom of your NES. So the full list of features and links to even the SNES controller adapters are all in this post. You have everything that you could imagine at the moment, but there's still things like web configs and over-the-air firmware updates and a bunch of other cool stuff that could be done to this. So I would absolutely check this one out. It's also based off of Darth Cloud's open source Blue Retro software. So as long as you use low latency controllers, those Bluetooth controllers that you connect would run as fast as a Bluetooth controller could possibly run. I've seen them as low as less than half a frame of latency. So that's pretty awesome. And the fact that you could have your original controller still plugged in, if you want to be OCD about it, you could always just grab your wired controller if a really hard part of the game comes up or something. But this just seems like an awesome device, and it seems like something that if you use original hardware and you use a front-loading NES, then this is something you should at least consider. So check out the post to see if it's for you, and pre-orders are available for multiple stores if you want it. Lou from Lou's Retro Source just posted a short but really cool overview video of something called the ITX Llama, which is a new motherboard for retro PCs. And it's essentially designed to be as close as an original motherboard would be, but the CPU is based on a Vortex 86EX system on module with 128 megabytes of RAM, and it's an x86 compatible CPU with performance that's similar to a Pentium MMX 233 megahertz. Sound is powered by the Crystal CS4237B based sound card, giving you AdLib, Sound Blaster Pro 2, and Windows sound system compatibility. There's an SD card slot that emulates a hard drive and an HD clicker that you could get the sound of the old hard drives clicking, which is kind of fun. There's also an RJ45 connector for 10100 and PS2 keyboard and mouse connections. Now, this is an open source project and they're not being manufactured at the moment, but this is something that you could make yourself, or maybe somebody could step up to the plate and make their own or modify it. But basically, if you wanted to build a new retro PC and you just want to use brand new parts, this is all you would need. However, you do need to figure out how to get an AGP video card, which is something that you can still find pretty cheap on eBay and stuff like that. But honestly, I think this is pretty cool. And I think this is one of those bridge the gap products where it's not technically original hardware, but it's not FPGA hardware emulation. It's kind of something in between. And I think retro PC fans should at the very least check out Lou's video. It's short and to the point, which is a compliment. And I don't know. I think this is something that, most retro PC fans would probably be into. And who knows, maybe we'll see Reese do a super deep dive video on one of these or build his own or something. But this is the perfect intro video. So check it out if you're interested. So last week I talked about Video Game Perfection now being the EU seller of the GamesCare SCART switches, and they are now also officially a seller of the GamesCare component video switches. And these are the ones that have 3.5 millimeter jacks with breakout cables for audio and video inputs that allow it to be smaller and a little bit cheaper to manufacture than something with a ton of RCA ports on it, which anybody that's ever worked on projects that require those are probably just as shocked as I was to find how expensive those ports are. I did a deep dive review of it a while back, and basically it worked perfect for everything for me except the Wii. I would get audio clipping on the Wii, but video worked perfect. So I'm not sure if there was a motherboard revision update, or if the problem still exists, or if it was just a certain motherboard revision of the Wii, or I never really had time to dig into exactly why that was the case. But overall, other than that, I thought it performed really well. There was no video interference whatsoever. There was no audio interference added on any of the other consoles that I tried. And it worked with every resolution I threw at it, from 240p to I think 720p is the highest resolution I sent through it. So check out that original review if you're interested in it. But the price is about $160 plus shipping, depending on how many of those cable adapters that you need. So if you were looking for an automatic 6-in, 2-out component video switch that's totally safe to use both outputs simultaneously, $160 is a very good price. So you should at least consider this, and maybe we could kind of figure out what to do about Wii audio clipping. Maybe there's some kind of fix that we could put in. Maybe we could add a resistor to the 3.5 millimeter adapters to drop the voltage down a tiny bit on the audio. I don't know. Let's put our heads together for this one, because at this price, I think it's worth trying to work around many of the shortcomings, because other than the clipping, it did perform really well. But let me know what you think in the comments, and links to everything are right there. Now it's time for this week's Mr. Updates, care of Lou from Lou's Retro Source. As usual, I'm going to just skim through these, but if you want visual examples and a lot more details, please check out Lou's video. First up, Lou recently posted a video building a Mr. setup using only QM Tech components. So the D10 alternative with the SD-RAM built in, the QM Tech I/O board, and their case. The entire setup cost about $160, so that's a big deal considering the official DE10, just the DE10 alone, now costs $225. So It's kind of hard to get those devices. They're selling out right away, but I'm glad that more people are starting to put these videos together. And I want to see both sides of it. I want to see all of the advantages, like price. That's awesome. But I also want to see the shortcomings. And when I say that, I don't mean like in a finger waggy, let's talk crap type of way. I just mean let's all know what we're getting into. So if we do it, all of these components are mix and match, then you have to remember to remove this screw, tape this, whatever. I don't really care. I just want to know, because I think stuff like this will allow a lot more people to start contributing to the Mister project, whether that's gamers that just want to give their feedback and help test, or other developers that might not have been able to afford a couple of kits, because you usually want multiple if you're going to be working on this stuff. So I'm happy to see more of that stuff in there. Next up, the Tap2 project is currently working on launching games via CD-ROM the same way Tap2 launches. So this is not letting you actually play the games from a CD. However, if you connect a USB CD-ROM drive and you put in your disk, it will read the data off of it, figure out from a game ID library what game it is, and then launch that game from your collection, which is another novelty thing, just like Tap2. And like I always talk about with Tap2, if your opinion is that's dumb, I could just go to the menu and select my game, that's totally fine. But I also think a lot of other people's opinions is going to be, now I have a more tactile way and a more fun way to launch the games that I want to play, and grab that disc off my shelf that I've had since I was a kid and put it in, and just use it to launch the game and feel like it's a more authentic experience. I honestly see and agree with both sides of that. And I'm a huge fan of the Tap2 project. And sometimes when I have people over, that's the only way I launch games. Other times I just skim through and do it through the menu. I think there's no wrong answer here, but I love that whole launch games using the CD ID from discs. So we'll update everybody when that's an official thing, but this is pretty cool. The next game challenge on the Mr. Discord is Ridge Racer Type 4 for the PlayStation. It's a time trial challenge on 4 different stages. The challenge goes to October 27th, and you can submit your score on the Discord. Next, RetroFrog is now selling 3D print files to the case that's designed for the retro remake Mr. Pie that could be purchased on Etsy for $6. So I like this. Todd eventually releases things open source, so maybe at some point he'll do this as well. But I think this is a pretty cool way of both giving back to the community while also trying to get paid for all of his time that he puts into this stuff. So I think this will work. I think this is a good idea, and I've seen a ton of people on social media already happily pay the money and thank him for it. Because if you have a 3D printer, sometimes you really want to support the developers, but you also want to use that 3D printer that you bought and like to play with. So I'm behind this. I think it's a good idea, and maybe eventually Todd will release it free for an open source thing. But for now, I'd happily pay the $6 if I had a 3D printer and needed one of those. Next, the Amiga Vision project is adding a new category to its game listing. The category is dedicated to the Amiga Arcadia system, which was arcade hardware that was based on the Commodore Amiga. If you want to see the history of this hardware, then check out the video by RMC, which, if you're into that stuff, you probably already saw that video. Neil makes great videos. But anyway, continuing on. Antonio Villena is doing an interest check for a micro MT32 Pi that has no screen or buttons. An MT32 Pi will allow you to play upgraded music on cores that support it. Even with the missing buttons, all functions are supported through the Mr. on-screen display. So if you've seen those, I actually think they look pretty awesome. But they sit next to or on top of your Mr. setup. They have a little screen with buttons on it that show you what's going on. But I also totally understand the more minimalist point of view for people that just want it to work type of thing. So awesome that if this ends up being made. So if you're interested in this, definitely check out the interest checklist. Next, Ronnie Snice released two new wallpapers for the Mister. One is based on Double Dragon 2 Arcade, and the second is based on Shadow Dancer for the Mega Drive. You could download these just by enabling the wallpapers in the Update All script, and really, you should have done it already. I say it every time I talk about Ronnie's wallpapers. The worst thing that could happen is you go, I just prefer the fuzz or a blank screen, and you disable it. That's it. But honestly, they're free. They work on CRTs and flat panels, and I absolutely love them. So why not try out something that's free and could probably look awesome on your Mister too? Also, Sorg had the Linux MiSTer distribution updated with a bunch of different changes that fix Logitech driving wheels. Force feedback's been enabled on a PlayStation adapter. The Nintendo controller driver also has a division by zero fix, and there's updates for main and menu that support the latest I/O board. So that's kind of a no-brainer. I would just run update all to get all of those. Next, it was announced that save state support is being worked on for the SNES core by Paul BNL. And that is really cool because a lot of people really rely on save states. And even pro gamers, speedrunners, sometimes you use those save states to go back and practice all the hardest spots so then you could go speed run the game and get it done. Or, maybe you're like me and you're just old and tired and you don't have hours to sit in front of your computer or in front of your console to play the game until you beat it. Sometimes you want to just go through and, progress as you can, save where you left off and, pick up from later. So very cool that they're working on that. Next, a beta for the Sega Saturn core now supports the Stunner and Virtua Light Gun. So users of Snacks, Snack 64, and MrCade Remote V2 were having issues with this beta, but the fix for those devices is already posted on the Mr. Add-ons website. Awesome, responding immediately to that. So current devices have the fix implemented. So that's very cool because anybody that's into Virtua Cop might really appreciate this. And if you haven't seen the Virtua Cop documentary by Pandemonium Reviews, that's a must watch. It's long, but it's one of those videos that it's like, oh, this should have been like a Netflix docu-series. You don't think of it as sitting in front of it for hours. Watch it, as needed or as you can over the course of whatever time period you want. But yeah, it's a good one. Last week, we talked about an update to the Genesis MIDI core, but we got it wrong. It was actually an update about a different custom MIDI core by Modal Module called Ultima Chip, and it has features like being able to use both the Game Boy and Genesis sound chips at the same time. That's cool. I can't wait to hear what musicians come up with using both of those. And lastly, Hotega released a beta for Konami's X-Men arcade game, which is, I think everybody's probably familiar with that one. And as with all of the Hotega betas, they're for Patreon subscribers only. But as soon as the bugs are worked through and it's in a more stable state, it'll be released for everybody to use. So I've always supported that model, and I'm very happy being a Hotega Patreon supporter. I have not had time to try anything recently, but not specifically the X-Men arcade game, but I'm really looking forward to it because I loved the cartoon as a kid, and every time we went to an arcade with my cousins and we saw that, we would run over and play, and none of us were very good at video games, so we never made it very far, but it was always cool to play as the X-Men and enjoy it in an arcade setup. So really looking forward to trying it. And this one can support up to 6 players. So this would be fun if you have a bunch of people over and you all just want to play a fun beat 'em up game. So that's it for the Mr. Updates. As always, thanks so much to Lou for keeping up with the stuff. There's no way I could, and I'm very happy to support him on Patreon because I would never be able to keep up with all the Mr. News without him. So thanks, Lou. Well, another kind of short one this week, but I was able to get all the time sensitive stuff out there. There's a bunch of stuff that I haven't been able to get to that is not time sensitive. It's not going to sell out, but it's really fun things that my fellow nerds would enjoy. And I feel bad that I haven't gotten a chance to get to sharing that information yet. But I just think I got a bunch of stuff going on. I never want to miss a roundup. So let's get the time sensitive stuff out there as quickly as possible. And then I'll try to swing back around to get to the other stuff. I did miss last week's Q&A, but I'm 99% sure I'd be able to make it this week. So my apologies to any of my supporters for that one. But I don't know. I'm not good at taking breaks, even when I probably should. And, the algorithm says that you should never, ever take breaks anyway. So it's one of those things where I appreciated all the kind words in the comments. And I know that all the people who said, if you got to take a week off, we'll still be here. I know you meant it, and I do really appreciate it. But unfortunately, the more I thought about it, the more I realized that's kind of not how this works. So no breaks for me, but I'll try my best to keep up with all of the important stuff, meaning time sensitive. And I have so many other projects that I want to show you, so many things I've been working on. I still have that one huge video that's 99% done. I need to work on one thing, and the developer's working on one last feature. And I have 3 things piled right there that you all are going to be so excited about. They're not up for sale yet though, but yeah, so I'm going to just try my best to keep the shorter ones going for just the short term. And then when I jump back in, hopefully I could introduce some very, very cool products and or just topics to you all. But anyway, as always, thanks so much to everybody who watches, listens, plays nicely in the comments, and especially thank you to everybody who supports on any of those monthly services and continues to support even when I have to skip a Q&A week. Really means so much to me, and it is quite literally what's keeping all of this going. So thank you all so much, and I'll see you next week. This week's Roundup is brought to you by Neo Paradigm Entertainment, connecting Southeast Asian influencers with opportunities in the West.